Good afternoon, good evening, good morning, good whatever. It doesn't matter because we are in Web3. It's very global and we have all different time zones, all different beautiful people, all different cultures. But today we actually have Tribe with the Lost Realms project coming in here to do a presentation and an AMA for all you beautiful Degens of Degenheim. So, Nick, how are you doing today? How's it going?
I'm doing great, man. Happy to be here. It's actually a gorgeous day, so can't really complain, man. Trying to stay as positive in this world as we can, man. How about yourself?
Ha, can't complain. Getting a little bit of a cold, but I'm here. I've been looking forward to this AMA for some time now. So if you want to go ahead and just like get rolling, this is a little bit different than a normal AMA. You guys actually have a presentation for us, correct?
Yeah, just have like a few slides. It's always helpful for us to kind of give a little bit of visual background. I mean, really for us, it's a big belief in our opinion is we want to treat our community members with as much transparency as possible. And what we recognize is, decks usually are really great tools for investors and business development partnerships, but it's really been also a great way to kind of, immerse our community and potential, prospective community members to really understand what we're doing. Plus, we have a lot of amazing art, so a deck really helps kind of showcase that. And I'll kind of drop some cool visuals as well in the chat as well for some gifts because we really want that world to come alive. So yeah, we'll kind of walk through the deck and kind of jump around. I think relevantly, what's really exciting is we want to make sure that we're sharing you with you guys the most important insights of what we're building that's relevant to your community as well. And what I'll do is I'll kind of pause every like kind of like 15 minutes or so, and we could kind of run through any Q&A questions. And Zero, if there's anything you want to ask about, feel free to ask, man. I want this kind of be free flowing, making sure we're getting you guys information. You could kind of pull any of the questions from the chat as well as we kind of go through the slides as well, if that sounds good to you.
Oh, I love it. Sounds perfect. Let's just get rolling and I'll ask any relevant questions as they come up. And I'll keep an eye on the actual Lost Realms AMA questions area and I can ask stuff out of there as well. Sound good?
Amazing. Yep, sounds great, guys. So yeah, just as a high level, I go by Saint or Nick. I've been working in like Web3 for essentially the last 18 months as both a collector, advisor, builder, and trader. And what I've really just wanted to do and get an understanding for is what is the true power of Web3. And what I've kind of seen through my product experience individually and collectively with a lot of our team members is that Web3 just truly has a unique power to differentiate and put ownership back into the users. This has been something that I feel is like really, really empowering of Web3 technology. And it can go even further when we think about all the other benefits that come with blockchain technology and Web3 infrastructure. And what I recognize that these are all layers that we're really going to be able to push forward and really make sure that we ensure the consumer, the customer, the gamer, the player really has more ownership in this world. And that's really where we think the Web3 revolution starts. And what we're really focused on at Tribe is designing those Web3 entertainment universes, those ecosystems. And we think this spans across all consumer. But what we're really excited to start with is really the sentiment of gaming, which I know we'll have a lot in common with here in the world of Degenheim. And the big real reason why we get excited about gaming is not only do we come from a gaming background, but it's really recognizing that gaming has played a pivotal role in onboarding the masses onto almost every new technology shift. Whether it was the age of personal computing, whether it was the age of mobile computing, whether it be the age of streaming, all of these technologies, and we believe Web3 will be a really critical factor. We think gaming is going to play a meaningful role in onboarding those users, introducing new UI, UX, and introducing new systems to really allow for ownership to take hold. And once we have that, we think a much, much more exciting world gets filled up. And that's kind of where our deck kind of starts off with, right? And we kind of know all of this about all the promises about Web3 gaming, why we're all excited to be here, and all the value it can create. But there is a dark truth about all of this as well that we run into is that the first wave of a lot of Web3 gaming was quite immature, right? Even though we might have been huge fans of crypto gaming, what we could see with a lot of the games, projects, and NFTs that we may have participated with it really led to really lackluster results, right? And we kind of bucket them in kind of three core areas that you usually see. First was is like a lot of these titles were utilizing play to earn as an infrastructure. And with play to earn, it usually led to like broken economy designs. What usually this happened was it was a Ponzi system where someone would create the economy in Excel spreadsheet and kind of linearly apply it without recognizing any changes in the economy health or volatility. And what this effectively led to is kind of a house of cards syndrome where almost all of these were crashing within the first 90 days of launch. The second problem we run into is just a lot of games weren't built by gamers, right? Or game developers. What you saw is that most of the crypto games that came were either overwhelmingly boring or underdeveloped or never shipped, right? And this was also another problem that came with this marketplace. It was the promise where a lot of the capital that was being aggregated and allocated was really just to be able to fund the project. And usually what most people underestimated is like just to build a good mobile game, it's going to take a competent team 1 year. And just to build like a really great AAA MMO and you start layering these things, it could take multiple years, right? With teams of 50 plus, 100 plus, 250 plus as well. So this is kind of where just the market was unprepared to really solve for the needs of gaming. And last and most importantly, people really struggled with ERC20 token economies. With a lot of this kind of application of amazing smart contracts, the problem was is no one really understood how to design ERC20s for utility. Rather, it was always optimized for liquidity. And when you're optimizing for liquidity, what became the primary issue in this marketplace is that people were just really looking to dump and be able to get access to any type of funds as early as possible. But what happened is almost everyone was incentivized to dump. The holders were incentivized to dump, the investors were incentivized to dump, developers were incentivized to dump. And it just became, unfortunately, a cyclical downtrend, which really hurt a lot of these games. So for us at Tribe, we've just been really trying to think about this because I'm going to be very honest. Building Web3 games is literally the hardest thing you can do in consumer technology today. It's a totally different beast. It's a totally different understanding. Growth is way different. Product development is way different. Marketing is way different. Value proposition is way different. User session is way different. Infrastructure is way different. The list goes on and on. So with that, it's really important to recognize that it's not just a simple shift that's going to make this, right? Rather, it's recognizing you have to do a larger shift that understands the overall ecosystem. So what we've been trying to do is we really are interested in trying to take the best of what the world has been doing already in Web3 and kind of layering our own stuff on top. And I could talk about each of these points in detail, but like I just want to kind of tap into one of these kind of five sub points here that we saw were really interesting insights from the market. And the first one, most important, was the idea of embracing the full power of NFTs. One of the things that you saw with a lot of game projects, and I think you guys will also see this as well with Degenheim, is you essentially had two choices to make, right? You could either build your game economy as an NFT first game economy, where it's the NFT asset that's first being allocated, and then kind of layering on the economy over time. Or what you're doing is you're doing like a primary token sale, right? And you're essentially selling tokens directly to be able to have access and ownership in the world, utilizing that fund through usually a SAFT agreement is what those are called, a simple agreement for future tokens. And you're essentially then funding and utilizing that capital for that. But in that latter issue, what ends up happening when you do token first sales is that you start putting a lot more stress on your economy than that is necessary. Specifically, what happens with a lot of these token first sales is that they essentially incentivize the behavior of traders rather than gamers, right? These are individuals who are trying to get discounts on tokens and potentially profit on the return on the value of those tokens in the future. But in most cases, most of those users aren't looking to play the game. They're not looking to play the product experience. They're looking to really just profit from the experience over time, which is a fair investment threshold. But what ends up happening there is that you lead to problem number two, is that you now create a fracture where there's different economic alignment and upside between those who bought the tokens and then those who may have bought the NFT assets in the future. Essentially, your gamers are no longer the first class citizens in your economy. but rather the traders are as well. And I think this is like a really important thing to understand in this marketplace because in the end, when you don't put gamers first, you start compromising the overall value of where this actual game economy can go and whether or not the holders truly, and more importantly, the gamers who are engaging with the game loop are put first in the priority. And then the third kind of flaw that comes with a lot of these token first economies as well is that you essentially run into the other core problem of economy balancing, which is really the largest act and the largest issue to get right in this economy and this system. One of the biggest problems you see in this marketplace is that as an economy designer, the last thing I would want is a whole bunch of my tokens already spouted to a bunch of holders where I either have to figure out how to sync them back into the game or I have to face a bunch of sell pressure of those tokens based off the different unlock periods and vesting periods as well. And again, that's not a healthy way when you're trying to build this fragile Web3 economy. And this just shows you kind of some of the depth of thinking that we've been trying to go through and understand that kind of leads us to different decisions. So with that kind of insight, we recognize everything we do needs to be NFT first. And there's a lot of bonuses of NFT first, right? Yeah, as you guys can see, identity matters, right? Each of you having your own Degenheim character or the character that you represent from your PFP community really allows you to build for that. And again, the word community then gets compounded there as well. Usually, right, when you're doing private token sales, the community structure is quite different than what you're actually doing with an NFT first community that's aligned with the overall project. So with these kind of smaller decisions, we started to recognize how we needed to prioritize our game assets and what we're kind of building for. And again, I could double click on all of these points. There's a kind of a lot of interesting things here of what we've seen in the market. You know, the other thing that you see is that we're web based. We're doing everything in the browser initially. We have built on the Unity engine, which allows us to go to mobile. But the real reason why we're building for browser is we optimize for control. One of the biggest things that we're really scared of is going onto a platform that we don't have control on the tools, resources to protect our holders. For example, mobile's really exciting. We built a lot of our games and our products on mobile historically. But the issue is Apple still has not really given great clarity on what you can do on mobile at this point. Effectively, they're actually saying you can't do any utility token gating behind an NFT that was purchased somewhere else. So when you kind of see all these layers and these problems of this marketplace, what we recognize with the browser is we could build there first, be able to own that experience with no restrictions, and then have the ability to port the experience relatively quickly to whatever medium we want, whether it be mobile, VR, AR, PC, standalone apps. All of that becomes available to us. But in the browser, no downloads, one click upload, and no friction and no bloatware. It really allows for kind of the best of both worlds. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of insights on just kind of how we're starting to layer the project and what we've taken away from some of the best builders. But what we also realized behind this is that we needed to add something to ourselves. Like we needed to make sure that we were leveling up the game. And these are kind of the ways that we at Tribe are really trying to understand is like, okay, we learned all this stuff from the market, but how do we now introduce a new paradigm? How do we build that holder centric, that player centric, that customer centric future? Because that's what we really care about. That's what matters more to me than anything else is can we fulfill that promise? So this is kind of where we get really excited on some of the things that we're also doing a little bit more differently and leveling up in regard to the space. And this is why we're also excited from a lot of the projects we see in these communities as well, alongside Degenheim, is where you're actually working and building the game prior to mint. I think this is a really important thing that people can really feel excited and more importantly, aligned with your project experience. So for us, what we're really focused about Lost Drums and what we're really building for is that Lost Drums will only mint once we feel the entire game and process is ready to go right into it live post mint. And our goal is to actually have 180 days of content fully ready to go so that there's an actual live economy that we could build with live operations and continuous deployment. We believe this is the promise we owe to holders, right? And we owe to kind of the community members. And also it's just a way to kind of layer up value propositions where, again, trust can be garnered. I think this is one of the other important factors when you're trying to build in this space. It's getting alignment and trust with everyone that is being provided. So rather than essentially having a promise of a game, we want to fulfill that and be able to showcase that with gameplay video ahead of time for Mint, and of course, being able to go into a product experience for the core Lost Realms. But in the end, you're trying to build this very large universe. So the question as you build this large universe is what are the other assets, collections that you want to tie into that? And that's another thing that we're working on very closely to really build up lots of layers of values. And we'll talk a little bit about that later. The other couple things real quick, and then I'll kind of pause for some Q&A to make sure we have some time to just address some of these points. But just real quick, we're also a full stack gaming team. We've worked at some of the biggest studios before in the past. Our goal has really been this idea that we want native game developers in-house and really working with them closely to make sure that we're developing for what we think the next wave of Web3 gaming is really going to be like. We think this is an important differentiator in this market. Similarly, like we're built by and for Web3 natives. I think this is the other thing that a lot of people might overlook in this market, in our opinion. Right now, it's really important to understand that gaming is promising, but we don't have true gamers on L1 ETH at the moment right now in terms of the percentages we're seeking. When you actually do wallet analysis, what you start recognizing is that the amount of actual active gamers, those who are willing to spend multiple hours, per day in long sessions over multiple sessions per week, that's really a small fraction of the true user base that exists right now. And the honest truth is that we're built in a trader market at the moment right now with tools like Blur, with other third-party infrastructure tools that help facilitate trader activity. What you're seeing is that a lot of the games that you need to be built are for very different session lengths. They're not like what mobile games traditionally were. Like when we worked and built mobile games, we were expecting users to spend, a casual user who was fairly engaged, 3 to 6 hours a week in our game experience over, 15 to 25 sessions. But in Web3, it's very different. Users aren't looking to sink that much time yet. So it's understanding that you actually have to work your way up to earn that session length, that amount of sessions per week, and that total amount of gameplay time, especially from a trader first community. So because we're Web3 traders first, Web3 collectors first, we have a really good understanding of where that sequence is, and more importantly, what is that assumption on session length design that we need to get right. And it's important to recognize that, this market is dominated by whales, and whales are healthy in any market, and whales dominate free-to-play gaming and a lot of other genres of gaming as well. But the important thing to kind of understand with the whales is that they play games very differently, right? They're playing games more for ownership status rather than gameplay status, right? Even if you look at the largest whales on Axie or on Zed Run, right? Two of the four biggest games ever in terms of ETH volume, right? Well, I'm sorry, OpenSea volume, whether it be Polygon ETH or ETH generally. Both of these games, when you look at their whales, most of the times the whales were actually, quote unquote, utilizing different members for scholarships or renting or breeding just to be able to generate asset profit. They really weren't actually interacting with the game loop as well. So this is the hard challenge of Web3 gaming. How do you build a game that's appealing to gamers and appealing to traders and be able to manage that for the right time point and interval in this marketplace as well? And if you can do that, there's something really special you can capture. But if you struggle and maybe don't choose the right side, this is where, again, a lot of big challenges can also happen as well. So, again, just a little bit more insight on our thinking. And of course, we'll kind of use the second half of this conversation to share more about the games and the product. But we always find it valuable to give you just a sense and a lens and a view into our lens on how we're building, how we're prioritizing, because it's also going to be exactly what we were talking about earlier. This is our framework, right? And our framework is going to allow us to ebb and flow with market conditions. Like we're already thinking through massive changes on behalf of our community just from what happened in the last week alone, right? And the reason for that is that all these macro conditions impact. If liquidity is sucked out from the market, right, you have to understand the ability to run token-based economies is going to be really low, right? When liquidity is back pumped into the market, right, there's an opportunity to have potentially paid mints. You kind of need to find that overall balance in that marketplace. And that's really kind of the insights we get here in terms of how we're balancing it. So, I could double click on a few more of these, but let me pause real quick to see Zero if there's anything you wanted to double click on or areas or questions you wanted to bring up based off what we've talked about thus far before we jump into the team and the projects thus far.
Mm, wow, that was amazing. Absolute fire, presentation so far, I must say. I do have to say, like, I love how you say if there's anything you want to double click on. I find that to be amazing. So I've never heard that before. One of the things I was like noticing, I mean, you guys are gonna not release the game until, release the NFT until the game is like ready to go, and you have like, a decent amount of gameplay already ready for people to go on. How are you guys going about doing that? As far as, a lot of gamings, like Degenheim, use some of the funds to really kind of push the game forward to have the ability to, hire some more developers, hire some more like, graphics people or like all that good stuff. So like, how are you guys able to do that? Because that's amazing thing, especially since we're in a bear market right now.
Yeah, I mean, we've been really lucky because, we've already had capital and have a team been working on this for the last 12 months in stealth. So we've been building for quite a bit of time, and that's kind of a little bit of our advantage. But the other part of our advantage is that we're building a totally different game design that's actually not mirroring what you would see traditionally in Web 2. Where what we're really trying to do is we're trying to understand what are the mechanics for people to manage assets, interact with those assets, and earn value from those assets, right? Like that's essentially what a core Web3 game experience needs to deliver in its V1. And of course, you could go really over the top with like, triple A MMOs, which some people are doing, or high skill game mechanics. What we've done is we've actually removed like the skill layer quite a bit. Like we're not using high APM actions in our game, right? So we're not doing an FPS, we're not doing a MOBA, nothing like that. And when by doing that, it essentially reduces the risk of your game development requirement at that point because you could essentially de-scope and make sure you're putting the emphasis on really the core project. So like for what we're trying to do, like if you're familiar with like game development, what is the hardest thing for a lot of 3D game development initially? It's animating, it's rigging, it's modeling, it's making sure all of the animations work flush, right? Then it's also then polygon optimization, shader optimization, environment optimization. And then you have sound layering, UI, UX, and you start seeing all these different layers come in. And we worked on some of the biggest 3D games ever. So we've gone through that cycle. But what we did intentionally, which is really a nice advantage of being 2D, is that we removed a lot of that 3D abstraction, which is a really large factor. It like probably de-scoped the game design by 50%. And then the other factor that we've done is that we removed a lot of the core game infrastructure that you would traditionally see in a Web 2 that's a lot of the bloatware. We just wanted to have core loop design. And when you have core loop design and you could rethink asset management in forms of NFTs and wallets, you actually get a much more simplistic game that still has complexity and depth and story. So I know that sounds a little soft without seeing all the details of the game, and we'll share some of that as well here today. But that's kind of been our big advantage of being able to take on that risk. And this is not a risk. Like I share this, like this is not a risk that I say everyone can take on. We are in a position of privilege, to be very honest. Like we're in a small position of privilege because there's a little bit of capital for us to be able to build, and we're committed to this vision, right? Like I've been building this thing for 12 plus months, right? With zero salary, right? Like my goal is not to make money here. My goal is to what I believe is building what I think is the next bridge of consumer ownership. And like I think that mission drives us more than anything else because we want to be protectors of users. We want to be protectors of players. We want to be guardians in that manner. And because of that, we could really build an interesting product experience that doesn't require that weight and that cost and that time that traditionally happens for a 3D game as well. So hopefully that gives you a little bit of a lens there too.
No, absolutely, and I think that not only is this a good fit for you guys to come in here and do this with Time because we're gaming projects, but I feel like we're like kind of also looking at Web3 gaming very similar as you guys are. The whole working and building before you actually release the NFT. Obviously, we still have some time for that to come out, but I think that we're like on the same page, and I think that's a really cool thing. And I'm just so happy to have you guys here. But how about we just like go a little bit more into it? Because I have some more questions. Because like some of the stuff that I want to ask is not necessarily just about Lost Realms. I kind of like want to hear about what you think is the one of the biggest things. Why like Web3 gaming? Like, what's the biggest thing that is the biggest advantage to Web3 gaming versus Web2? Like, what is the one thing that like Web2 cannot provide, but Web3 really can provide?
I mean, it is still just ownership principles,
Yeah,
right? Ownership and realignment
absolutely.
of economics between the player and the developer. Like this is a structural business advantage, right? Like this is really how you want to think through it. Web 2 companies cannot give you ownership of all the money. Like we built Web 2 games, like literally Web 2 games that the top spender has spent like $8 million into it in a freaking free to play mobile game, right? Like insane amounts of numbers.
Oh
But
yeah.
like, and people don't realize how big free to play is on individual spenders, right? And that person got zero value of their ownership. They had no way to compound their progress. As soon as the game was essentially sunset, right, their value essentially eroded. And this is like a huge factor where you see it's a consumer one-way sync. And I think that's something that's really important to correct. Because if we correct that, then it means that ownership value is more accessible to the players and the gamers, which is something that effectively Web 2 cannot do. I think the other things that I think are really important in Web 3 is transparency. Like, what is one of the biggest dark sides of like gaming, especially like free virtual MMO gaming, is that almost anyone who's doing the economy design is manipulating the economy to fuck the user over.
Yep.
Right? This is like constantly happening and you can't see it. Right? Like very few people can see it. It's only the whales that feel it because they're the ones going up against that pressure. But because you have a one-way economy that essentially is pegged to a hypothetical value of whatever the game designer wants, you could hyperinflate that economy at any given moment. You could, of course, and like the common story we all hear about Vitalik, right? Like having his character nerfed in World of Warcraft was a factor, right? But like all of those things can change in a Web3 world, right? With immutable ownership, which I think is really important to keep transparency and alignment with all parties. And then, yeah, I think the third thing that I think is super important, which is kind of what we've been operating on, is interoperability and composability. This is like a promise and a word we've talked about so long, but like no one's really delivered on it. And I think that's really magical. Like in Web 2, it's so hard to build a partnership with another Web 2 game, right? Like everyone's competitive about it. Everyone's like really like tough about like, hey, I don't know if we could partner with you. We have to go through legal. In Web3, it's totally different. In Web3, it's like you don't even have to ask for permission technically, right? If they own the asset, you can kind of bring that asset technically in your world or give rewards for that asset ownership as well, which I think is massively amazing. Like if you're a growth marketing guy, the amount of amazing stuff you can do with transparency of wallet data, the transparency of like capturing them through discords and Twitter, like there's a total new way to connect with your ideal user that has never been seen before. So I think these are just some of the elements where I want to make sure that every one of you guys who come from a really exciting community prior to even Degenheim, right? Like for me, it was like Ether Orcs was one of my first things, right? Or, Cyber Kongs was one of my earlier ones as well. Like, can I bring those characters into our world too? Where you have that feeling where your assets are increasing value and utility over time. And that's what's like the real beauty of this. It's one thing to have one company push utility for all their assets forward. It's another where any other company could take those utility and assets forward. Like technically, we could go revive a game, right? Technically from the dead if we wanted to, right? Like go take, like for example, which will be a really funny example here is go take CryptoKitties, right? Like if you
Hmm.
look at CryptoKitties now, its floor is like 0.01 ETH, right? It's essentially no one's using it. But what if you actually created a scenario where it's like, I'm creating CryptoKitties 2.0. For every CryptoKitties you own, you could burn it and we'll give you a free mint into the next CryptoKitties 2.0, right? I mean, you might have to change a different brand name, right, for those legal reasons,
Hmm.
right? But you could call it Cats 2.0. But you could literally do that, incentivize that audience and those ownership no, so those asset owners to come over into your world and be able to, either burn, redeem, or claim another asset because you qualified that audience to be special or valuable to you. And that's just like a total different way of game design, a total different way of growth design. And we haven't even seen this put out like in full effect yet. But when people start realizing this, I think you're going to just see like what we really believe is going to happen, like a golden age for players. We're so close, although I know it does feel far at times, but the next 24 months is going to be really special. We still need a couple breakthrough hits. That's the honest truth. Axie was not that breakthrough hit that we needed. There's a lot of value that Axie did offer to the ecosystem, though, but we still need a couple of those breakthrough hits to come through. And once those land, there's going to be something where it's just a domino effect from there. And
Hmm.
I think we're going to feel it very quickly.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think that one of the, like you were touching on, the digital ownership is the main thing that Web3 provides that Web2 cannot. And I feel like people in Web2 that game, like they didn't realize that that's even a possibility. And so they're not even like, asking for that because it's not possible. And like you were saying, the interoperability between, like, just imagine if you're playing World of Warcraft and then you want to play another game, like you can bring your World of Warcraft character over to that game, but that's not possible. But it can be made possible here in Web3. So I'm glad you touched on that. I couldn't agree more. If you'd like to just go into a little bit more of the presentation, I can ask more questions. I feel like we're going to make this AMA last a long time because we both are very passionate about what we're talking about. So I definitely want to hear more about it. I know everybody else out there wants to hear more about it. So please feel free to continue on.
Yeah, absolutely. And I think like that's kind of the fun thing here, right? Is we can essentially build and scale for what we think this market needs. And really what I'm most excited about here is that we as an organization have the ability to take all these principles to heart and like push that new age in. That's what we're really excited
Yep.
about. And we take that responsibility very seriously, right? And that's why like to be honest, like, the crazy thing we told people is like we had art assets done like 6, 7 months ago if we wanted to mint. Right. We could have minted in a bull cycle, technically, right? But again, we wanted to make sure that we held our holders first. And the last thing I want for a holder is to be bag holding a mint that's promising a future game that's still half a year away.
Yeah.
So this is a big reason why we've kind of emphasized all of this. And, speaking to the team and the background, what's really great is we come from a lot of the, big AAA game studios, both on Web2, on mobile and console. Our engineering leads come from LucasArts, where they worked on both the Star Wars and Indiana Jones franchise. Sorry, just blank there. Our game design team is kind of spread across like Machine Zone and Wildlife, where we worked on top grossing games from both casual to mid-core to hardcore. Previously, for me, I was VP of monetization and revenue at Natural Motion Games. Over there, I kind of launched 8 number 1 hits, including CSR Racing, which at the time was the number 1 grossing game of all time on mobile. It's went on to do like over 100 million downloads, and thankfully that company was acquired by Zynga for about $600 million a few years back as well. And really, what's been great is that these are all builders I've been in the trenches with, people we've worked with. We've had the privilege, in the past to raise from, really prestigious VC firms. And even today, we've had the ability to raise from really amazing Web3 angels. And it's really allowed us to build what we think is a core team to kind of get this right. And this is just a few of the partners. We have additional team members supporting on art. Like we have a pixel art team. You'll see our pixel art team is already up to like 7 people at the moment right now, and I only list one of them here. So we have a lot of cool pieces. And what's really exciting is like, we are a full stack team. So this is kind of how we've seen our economic and our team structure as well. This is just on the product side. This is on the actual technology side. And the goal is really to make sure that we have like people in place for every one of these elements. And this is kind of the big factor that we're trying to get right in this space is making sure the game can get to that level that we really seek. And the benefit that we essentially have is we've been building in stealth, right? And what we call is these entertainment universes for the last 12 months, right? And this is really where you get to see some of these pieces come out and really get to see what we're trying to do, where there's ammunition and trust that a product experience is coming along with it. And that's again where our big leverage point is, at least in our opinion, is that we hope the trust is the product more than anything else that we see in this kind of marketplace as well. So, kind of building in stealth, what we can kind of go into is like, what are we trying to build? It's this idea of an entertainment universe. So our goal is actually to build like not just a game, a universe that surrounds that game. We're trying to win IP, storytelling, art, and economy design all within that universe. Because in the end, a game is just one medium to be able to share consumer entertainment and fun, right? There's a whole bunch of other mediums, print, art, film, audio, whatever it may be, right? We want to play a role in all of those. But what we do believe is going to be the anchor to almost any of these entertainment universes is going to be a game. The game allows for that economic engine to exist and allows for it to be a spout for more asset value as well. And then over time, we keep layering stuff, right? And that's what's kind of really exciting here is that we're not just thinking of the first game, which is a tactical RPG game, and I'll kind of share that about Lost Realms. We also have visions and have already started the outlines of what game two and game three are going to look under just the Lost Realms ecosystem. And then for those of you who've been following us along closely as well, what's really exciting here too is that we have a whole nother game already at a playable state called Fury, which is our racing game. It's a total 3D racing franchise that we've actually have also in the background as well too. So what's really exciting for us is that we're really being able to understand how to layer up multiple pieces of content to layer up these universes. It's not just the NFTs, it's asset ownership of the tokens, other in-game exclusive, expanding to other content like comic books or other games as well. And this is where you really get something powerful. This is where I think like the real winners of this market's going to be. I think we at least have an interesting blueprint. It's of course now going to come down really to execution. But if you could build these universes, right, you could then expand your holder base, right? Because the real challenge in this market, right, is that we are still working with a very finite user base, right? We're really only talking about 50,000 meaningful wallets in this marketplace on L1 Ethereum at the moment right now. Of course, those wallets expand over time when you're looking at different other chains and looking at just people who are interacting with crypto alone. But if you're actually looking just at NFTs, we're at a very niche part of the user base. So the way you have to think about it, in our opinion, is that you need to layer your universe and expand your universe to be able to sequentially onboard the masses based off how the user base looks like at any given point. So of course, there's a lot of factors that are out of our control, the macro, right? Understanding how to solve like wallets is going to be a really important factor. Solving security is going to be a really important factor to onboarding the masses. Of course, solving the centralized versus decentralized exchanges is going to be an important factor. But the goal is that a great universe, when constructed, is taking advantage of the space that is being provided. So the goal is not to overbuild. You don't have to do something where you build for 2 million users right out the gate, in my opinion. You could build for that first 5,000 unique holders. You could build for initially your 250 unique holders, right? Which we actually have with one of our initial collections, Tribe Diamonds. It's the only NFT we have out, which is our Genesis collection. And the idea is that what we're trying to do is we start with this Tribe Diamond anchor of 250. And our goal is now to sequentially add in layers to build in the universe for each of these worlds. Lost Realms is first, right? But what's really exciting behind that is Fury. And I could touch base a little bit on that. So maybe it'll make sense to maybe jump a little bit deeper into Lost Realms real quick as we kind of have about 15 minutes left. As I want to make sure there's room for any questions at the end. So just real quick, Lost Realms is a tactical MMORPG. It's really tapping into the nostalgia of maybe our favorite games when we were, kids. For me, like I'm in my early 30s, so for me, it's always like thinking about my first experience with Legend of Zelda, my first experience with Final Fantasy 1, 2, 3, and 4, Chrono Trigger, Heroes of Might and Magic, Warcraft 1 and 2. And these are the areas where pixel art really shine for me. And I recognize like there's just a sentiment of that nostalgia that we want to tap into with Lost Realms, and that's kind of where we're starting. The other cool thing here as well is that we're just building like a huge pixel world. We'll talk about that as well. We're building a game economy where the token is all utility oriented. The amazing thing is there's no private sale of the token. If there's any access to the token, it is only through NFT ownership. And this is again where we ensure the holder alignment is first. We're going to be launching a token where we don't even give the team token allocation. right? The only thing we're giving to the team in terms of allocation is NFTs, and we will earn tokens at a similar rate as each and every one of you, because that's how you create economic alignment. There's no other empowerment in this factor. We are very happy by building something that we believe can get very large and still owning a very small piece of that pie. Because in the end, that's how we give economic ownership to all. You need to be able to allow for room for ownership to exist. And that means you have to make really smart business decisions along the way as well. And these are some of the fun, foundational elements that we're trying to get right with Lost Realms. So, kind of just jumping into it, a few of the product insights here rather than essentially going too deep. Like, we really believe in continuous deployment and live ops. I think this is going to be literally the number one best skill that every founder you're going to see in this marketplace, whether it be gaming or not gaming. It's the fact that you need to deliver something almost every 2 weeks. You need to keep attention really high. You need to have some layer of value that is always being exposed for what is next. If you can do that, you could really solve that retention gap. And this is something that we're really good at, especially almost anyone who comes from mobile gaming and has run live operations like and ran live operation frameworks like events, leaderboards, etc., will have a really good insight for this. And this is kind of where our bread and butter is. Product insight number two that we've really been doing is we really built an interactive community design, which I think is really exciting. And we're actually going to be amplifying that up again. So, if you are in our Discord or have been there for as an OG, there's going to be a lot more activities as we kind of get the next layers of our economy unlocked. And what we did in the early days was we had some of the greatest, like coolest little mini games in Discord. We had people kind of chanting stuff. We had people changing their PFPs. We had people playing mini games, and it really led to this kind of viral and super high activity Discord. And we want to continue this not only through our Discord and now into our Twitter, but also, of course, into our game experience as well. And kind of the last thing that we did really well, in our opinion, thus far with Lost Realms, and this is prior to launch, this is prior to mint, we already have some of the largest partnerships ever for like a Web3 project to launch, especially for a debut project. These are just all the logos of the companies we've announced today. And these are like major guys and OG guys and play to earn gaming and PFPs and token based gaming. And then, of course, like we even have leaders not only on ETH, but also on Sol as we partner with the gods. And the crazy thing is, we still have a few more announcements to come, which is what I'm really excited about because there's even more partners and it looks really cool. And when I say with partnerships, our goal isn't just to say, like, hey, we've announced a partner with A and B. What we've done is we've actually made them interoperable game characters within this world. So communities who own any of these assets from one of our partner communities will actually have the ability to mint a character into Lost Realms, and they won't need ETH. They'll just need our tokens in our game. And what's really cool about that is that we extend that utility, right? You could take your CyberKong and get a new one of one CyberKong in our world, right? And be able to have either further utility, further liquidity value, further trade value for you as well. And then similarly, right, with any of our collections as you play, you could get it. And maybe you're excited about all these collections, and maybe you don't have primary ownership. Now you could have secondary ownership in this collection. Maybe you can't afford a CyberKong, but for 15 ETH on the Gen collection, but maybe you can afford a CyberKong within Lost Realms, and there's potentially utility for that community to add into that. And that's what's really fun because this is just our childhood fun. Like, what did I love as a kid? I wanted my, I use this example a lot, but it's true. Like, I wanted my Power Ranger, I wanted my Gundam Warrior, and I wanted my Toy Soldier all in the same battlefield playing together for my Super Army. Like, why don't we have that for Web3? We have all these assets. So what we did is we went way above and beyond. We did all the art for all the collections, and they're all generative art. Like, what you're seeing is just one variation of this, right? Like, I could actually drop it in like the Lost Realm chat. And let me just drop some of these. These are actually pretty cool. What do we have? Kaiju, Galaxy Fight Club. Why not? I'll just give you all of them. Why not? This is cool.
Hell yeah.
This just shows you. It's uploading right now. Hopefully, it gets there in just a sec. Okay, cool. So what's going to be really cool about this is going to show you just like some of the generative traits that we've created. And this is just like a mini version of each of these as well too, which is really cool. So each of these collections just shows you all the range of the one of one traits. And this doesn't even include any of the mythical or legendary traits. These are just common traits. But you can see in this collection, right, what we've done is we've gone above and beyond to give each of these sub collections their own generative one of one NFTs. And again, that's kind of the delight that I'd be seeking if I were a user as well. So it just gives you a little bit of a sense of kind of how we're kind of pushing this market a little bit more forward as well. So, kind of outside of that, the other last insight here is just we have a ton of pixel art. This is like the most compelling pixel art team you'll ever see. It's probably one of our biggest strengths as an organization. Our creative director, Gokche, is literally a boss, and we just keep bringing on really, really amazing people. And like, if you haven't seen our stuff, like this is actually an animated GIF. Right now, you only see this still, but it's gorgeous. You see like a dragon in the background. You see the whole world kind of being alive. We have full pixel character arts, and this is kind of what the turn-based battle RPG battle loop looks like. And this is currently playable at this stage, which is pretty exciting. Separately behind that, each character is going to have its own different skill sets, its own different classes, its own different attacks and weapons. We're not grouping this stuff where everything feels the exact same. And what's really cool is that we just keep expanding with more and more pixel art where it actually goes to a whole MMO world map, right? Where you'll actually be able to make decisions on this world map, explore this world map. You'll be able to find new dungeons. You'll be able to find new pets. You'll be able to find new gold. And maybe as you kind of explore, you end up finding a raid boss that triggers a massive event of hundreds, if not thousands, of people playing with it together. And the idea is that it gives us the semblance of the game loops we remembered as kids. But what's really great about this is that it's built for you to play at your pace. You could play once a day for 5 minutes. You could play once a week for 10 minutes. You could play 10 hours a day if you want, right? There's replay value in all of this. But depending on what you seek for ROI and value capture, you can build this around your exact experience. And this is where we get excited because, again, we're not trying to force any type of user session. We're trying to meet the market where they want their user session to be. And this is a really great way for us to kind of collaborate towards that. So, outside of that, and let me pause you real quick on Lost Realms to see if there's any questions as we kind of wrap up. And then I'll kind of close with as well and just show you a little bit of a tease of like Fury. Fury's still not announced fully yet. It's still in our back pocket, but it's something that will come to you in early January at the moment right now. But it just shows you another aspect of like how much we've been building. It's not just one game, it's multiple games and multiple ecosystems. But hopefully that gives you a real deep sense of Lost Realms. This is where we really want to push Lost Realms to that next level. And we have all these pieces. We have 25 standalone characters, we have 16 partner characters. So that's 41 unique total character types that each have their own sub traits, their own one-on-one visuals, etc. And beyond that, right, we have 5 different raid bosses. We have 25 different environments. We have totally different battle effects for each character, for each type of attack they can do. It really allows for you in an MMO to have your own role, your own player style, your own value proposition. And then just imagine if you think through like an economy and a universe that we're trying to get to, when you see land, when you see a world, you can only imagine that maybe you get to claim your own land and have a city building mechanic in the future, right? There could be guild mechanics where you could join together with other people and fight 25 on 25. These are all the areas we want to get to and what we're so excited about Lost Realms. But Zero, let me kick it over to you. I know there were a few questions that came in. Want to make sure I could address them before we wrap up today.
Yeah, of course. Once again, thank you so much. I love that you dropped those pictures in there. I mean, I'm actually on the core team at Project Gojira, so I love seeing the Gojira, Lost Realms character. It looks really cool. And I have to add that I'm not a huge pixel art fan, but this is like easily some of the best pixel art I've seen. It's like super clean. It almost doesn't feel like the pixel art that we're used to in the Web3 space. Um, just wanted to point that out. I was just curious, like, how many hours?
Appreciate that.
Yeah, yeah. Well, I mean, it's just I'm not even buttering your biscuit. I'm just telling the truth there. That's the beautiful thing
Thanks.
about it. Um, But yeah, one of the things that I was like some of the people were curious about is, just talking about onboarding Web 2 and having that be a challenge. Is that something you guys are going to try to focus on to try to like bridge the gap between Web 2 and Web 3 and try to bring some of the people who are not really savvy in, crypto and all that stuff to like have them come over and play Lost Realms?
Not initially. We
Okay.
definitely want to do that, but I think it's a really hard challenge to solve. The real reason is like it's the economics behind it. Like if I'm gonna give like alpha here, it's recognizing onboarding Web2 users to create wallets is one of the most expensive actions, period. Usually it costs like traditionally in exchange to get a new user onboarded with a wallet. They usually would be paying between $250 to $1,000 per install, right? Per user who completes like a wallet onboarding. So the question that begs is that if you're really trying to solve Web 2 to Web 3 onboarding, it's probably not best to do that on L1 ETH, in our opinion. If
Hmm.
you are going to do that, you're going to have to go directly to an L2 or a different chain that effectively allows for like user adoption. Like, for example, a chain that almost no one looks at but is really fascinating for gaming is Wax, WAX. And their largest game is Alien Worlds, which some might have heard has actually at certain points over 1 million monthly active users. And what's really cool is that you could literally grab a wallet by connecting via like Google Cloud, right? Or sorry, the Google Gmail, right? Like you could actually use that as your Google sign on and be able to get an initial wallet, right? It's still, there's some funding issues, but they make it a lot easier. So they brought on all these wide funnel users really well. IMX is doing a great job. Soul is kind of doing a good job. So that's kind of where we see the value. I think the larger opportunity, at least for Lost Realms initially, at launch, especially in a bear, our goal is to capture the attention of whales. That's really what we want. People who are hardened Web3 natives that have been in the space and are excited for the future of what consumer entertainment can be when empowered with Web3 on L1 technology. So that's kind of where we're initially building. But look at this map, and what you could see is like this is just the first island. Imagine that after we fill this first island, the initial Genesis heroes get to claim their land on this island. Like, why can't we create other smaller islands around this that can be free claim mints, right? Where you can get smaller heroes that are a part of a different collection that have less value, but they allow the gamers to actually play the product experience all the way through. So we do have those design layers to be able to onboard people into the masses. But and the way we think our strategy is that if you're a sports fan, it's like, if you're in the US, it's like major league and college football, right? Or major league and minor league, right? You can create two different leagues of value that have different economic outputs and return. Or if you're in Europe, right? Like, it's League One versus League Two, right? Depending on whichever, sports league you're essentially watching or football league you're essentially watching there as well. And that's kind of how we see the value proposition here. So we're building like, the Premier League right now. That's what I want. I want League One, Premier League, all the best guys competing at the moment right now and being able to be a part of that world. Once we're able to assert and show that this is an economy and a universe that our users want and the market wants, we will then kind of see that expansion to wide funnel to be able to onboard to Web 2 bridges. But I think Web 2 bridges is going to be one of the most difficult things to solve over the next 12 months.
Yeah.
But I think there's some really cool guys. Like shout out to like what Limit Break and Digidaigaku is going to do with just a shit ton of capital, like Super Bowl commercial. Like whether or not you're
Yeah,
bullish and bearish on that idea, it's good for the overall ecosystem. It's
absolutely.
more attention, more awareness on some project, some idea that is going to bring hopefully new wallets to capture. And we have some of those metrics of how Coinbase performed in the previous Super Bowl, where they essentially claimed they got about 1 million wallets to essentially be onboarded, which is a huge ROI, right? If I tell you that
Wow.
effective CPI of what that was before, right? That could be technically Coinbase, if you talk to them internally, they believe that commercial generated almost $500 million of enterprise value for them at a minimum, right? Which is kind of a nuts thing to say out loud to a certain extent, or like, rough estimates are $200 million to $500 million of value creation. Again, that's very different for a game, but again, Gabe and Digi will have an opportunity to do that. And I know a lot of other people who are already prepping commercials. It might not be Super Bowl commercials, but you're going to see a lot of these guys come in. So that's kind of what we're excited about, is that some of these other people might take the arms and battles race to really be able to get Web 2. But I think the use of capital for smaller teams that are like under, say, 20 million in capital is going to be best suited for the current on-chain maxis on whatever chain you're building for, is really where that's going to be.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, it's a good approach, and like you were saying, it's like there's nothing more difficult than onboarding that, because like I mean, besides the money issue, it's just like the way people are. They just want things just so easy, and just like they want to be able to download an app and be playing or do whatever. And just like you got to make a wallet. What is MetaMask? Like, how do I get money in there? Like, how do I get an NFT? Where do I buy the NFT? There's just like so many layers to like kind of like be a hurdle for people. And yeah, I couldn't agree more. So like I'm a huge MMORPG player. Like I'm a bit of a dinosaur in this space because I beta tested World of Warcraft and things like that. What we're looking at right here is, you're saying that this is partial, like, just only part of what all the lands are going to be. You're talking about the minor and like major leagues and stuff like that. But like, is there going to be like expansion packs where like, in World of Warcraft or any other game, they add another continent or another race or another faction or things like that? Are you guys going to be using something like that?
You're saying like factions and guilds, correct?
Just content, like in general, like when you release the game, is that going to be all the content you're going to have, or will there be like expansion packs or DLCs per se that you're going to add more and more things on?
Oh, 100%. It's a universe that keeps expanding. Sorry, one sec. My dogs are wonderfully alerting me to someone at the door. Hey, Sophia, come here. Sophia, come here. Good girl. So yeah, our goal is like to continuously deploy to this marketplace, right? So like what in our lens, what I'm really excited about is that this is only going to be constant expansion. We actually already have like just a 3-year roadmap just for what Lost Realms is in our mindset, right? Like phase one is what we would call like community PvE. We're reclaiming our land back from this evil dragon, Druck the Dragon, that has essentially stolen our homeland from our ancestors, and it's our goal to avenge it. So this whole first act is actually us all being on the same side, attacking a NPC character essentially, right? And reclaiming this NPC world. Then act two is going to move more into PvP and city building, right? So you'll be able to potentially have land claims potentially, right? Be able to upgrade different city elements that give different powers to your character. And potentially then you start layering pets and vehicles and other elements that come in, spells, and the key is just recognizing that whole world can be created. But what's even more exciting is I kind of shared earlier in this quick roadmap. Let me just go back to this. This will kind of give you like a lot of the insight here as well. Is imagine that you like level up one of your characters in Lost Realms. Like you're working on him for like your 6 months, you get him to like level 55, all on chain data. You really love this character. What we're also going to be able to do is that in any future games in the Lost Realm universe we launch, and one of the games that we're thinking through is like a card battling trading card game. What's kind of nuts here, right, is that what we can do is we could build that composability factor for our own first party games in a really cool way. So you could take your level 56 character and a little bit of our tokens in our game and go mint a card pack, right, for the new card battling game, right? It will be a total different game and universe. But what's cool is that what we'll do in the smart contract is that we'll actually look at the metadata of what your character did in the previous world, its levels, its actual metadata, its strength, and we'll actually give you a one of one card that represents that character in the next game. So it's the idea that your progress rolls over to another world. And that's something that I think is so empowering in Web3. There's been so many fucking times that I spent hundreds, if not thousands of hours in a game. And then when that game puts a sequel out, they give me some like fraction of like tokens or zero asset value into the next game. And I think that just is like the worst part about Web2 because what they're doing is they're resetting your monetization potential. That's effectively what these products are doing. I don't want to view our consumers as monetization like vehicles where we're just trying to extract as much ETH out of them. What we're trying to do is we're trying to deliver them delight. So that's kind of what you'll see in our like whole structure of what we're building is that if you own the Lost Realms characters, right, you actually own the spouts to the entire Lost Realms economy because that is only where the tokens come from and that is only where the Genesis characters come from. And those are going to have huge amplifying value into hopefully this long term universe we want to build. That's the vision we hold and care about deeply.
I love it. That's amazing. Like, I'm glad that you guys have like thought. I mean, you guys have definitely thought about this for a long time. This is not just like some idea you guys just like randomly were like, hey, let's build an NFT project. You guys have put a lot of time and effort into making sure that this is like, gonna be something like for the long haul. And I appreciate that because right now, in this current market, we're seeing a lot of projects die, not just because of like, giving up on it or being a rug pull. It's just because they haven't planned for the future and they didn't plan for potentially being in bear markets. And sometimes funds allocation is an issue. So that's another question that I have to ask to you is like, like when the mint comes, what kind of an allocation are you guys going to do? Like, because I've seen some projects do like 80% of mint funds go to like the salaries of like 8 people, and that's just like to me just like not sustainable at all. So, what are you guys looking at for? Are you folding most of that mint money back into the project? But I do realize that you guys have been working without any kind of like a pay for this, so there will be some back pay for you guys because you've already been working for like what you said, like about a year or so.
Yeah, so I mean, the great thing is there's no back pay. That's the crazy thing. We as founders will take zero salary all the way through. Like, we're lucky enough to be in this privileged position to do so. And like, our goal is not here that we're sweating this out. If we are sweating this out, we're sweating it on equity, to be very transparent. We believe we're building an entity that will capture value over the long run. In regard to what we're actually doing, there will be bonuses given out to everyone else on the team, not founders, right? But everyone else, we are giving alignment of bonuses to them, and these are very small. So essentially, just to be very transparent, 92.5% of the mint funds go straight into trade, right? Only 7.5% is being used for artist bonuses and team bonuses initially. And here's the other crazy thing at the moment right now. We're still not even convinced that this will be a paid mint at the moment right now. We're even looking at a scenario of making this a fully free mint in regard to the meta and this opportunity. And I share this with transparency because honestly, if you're a project founder in this space and you're not thinking about what a free business model looks like, you're probably not actually evaluating and understanding the meta of where this market is going. Don't get me wrong, I'm not saying that paid mints can't work. I think it's just recognizing that everything has changed in terms of liquidity in this marketplace in the last 7 days. Prior to honestly FTX, things were looking really good, like really good.
Hmm.
Don't get me wrong, it was still a bear market, but a lot of the trends are good. ETH was looking healthy, liquidity was looking healthy amongst NFTs, right? But essentially, with this trade, this scenario, we've gotten to a point where we're recognizing, is our goal to keep putting more friction up? No, our goal is to make sure we get assets into the right people's hand who really believe in the world and the vision that we're created. And by doing that, a free mint does make sense. And it's something that we are deeply evaluating at the moment right now. But of course, that means that I'm also then reevaluating the entire business model structure. This means that we have to now consider, okay, with with royalty debates, right? What is essentially going to happen with how much royalties can you expect? Can you really enforce them? There's been some good positive signs from OpenSea and Blur recently, but again, it's something we know that we can't historically count on. So then the question just begs is, what kind of economic value can you build? And this is again where we're at least in another position of privilege where we are considering to raise venture capital, right? And venture capital can allow for us to consider a different time horizon where we don't have to extract as much. But at the moment, these are still decisions that are being evaluated and will probably be realized in the next 14 to 21 days. And the real thing is, like, I just need to see the contagion fallout from FTX. Like, that's the honest truth you should be hearing from every founder. Every founder should be paying attention to see how many institutions are impacted by FTX. And I can tell you it's much larger than what you're seeing publicly. I know
Definitely.
founding teams of NFT projects that have lost 50 to 75% of their treasury, right? And they still haven't announced it yet because they don't know how to deal with this problem set. I know full venture funds that have lost 15 to 30% of cash on hand, which is nuts, right? If you're a venture fund maintaining that type of cash position, just having a 10% hold on your IRR kills fund performance in a lot of these scenarios. Like, Multi-Coin Capital just came out and said that they have 10% is effectively stock. Mechanism Capital just recently, right, noted that they have a very sizable percentage of their fund stuck in FTX. So in all these kind of cases, what we have to recognize in this space is that the contagion and fallout is probably still 1 to 2 more weeks out. So what we really want to do, we want to make sure that again we meet the market where its expectations are, right? And if we can do that correctly, it's really going to make sure that we have an aligned community. And if our community believes in what we're building, we think that's all that matters. So I know that's kind of a little bit of a non-answer, but it is kind of exactly how we're thinking about it because that is the real live strategy that we're thinking through in the trenches today.
Yeah, exactly. And I think that you nailed it right on the head there, that there's a whole lot more of a fallout that we're going to find out in the next, coming weeks. Maybe even like longer than that. How long can people kind of just not be full on transparent about, losing the majority of their funds and they can't really continue the project on. So it's definitely going to be a ripple effect. And I just like honestly hope
Exactly.
for the best with that. I wanted to ask though, like someone was curious, it's like because you guys are like super successful in Web 2 and you absolutely crushing it. Like why Web 3? Is it just the fact that you can do giving digital ownership, like that you're a gamer and you want to make sure that people can have a chance to be able to own their assets in game, or is there other reasons why you guys decided to go to Web 3?
Yeah, I mean, if I'm going to be very transparent, I quit Web 2 because I was so disappointed in Web 2. That's
Yeah.
like the honest truth. Web 2 has been super boring, especially Web 2 mobile gaming. That's where my background specifically is. So let me speak to that. Web 2 mobile gaming has been so boring for the last 4 years. It's nothing interesting. No interesting new games, no interesting new design. It's essentially still the top winner, still winning, and people just essentially cloning with fast follows consistently through. And what you see with a kind of a lot of the manipulation and psychological fallacies, it's just a really rough network to really build in. And the question just begs is, yes, the promise of free to play was so exciting, but the realities, of course, with free to play is that they become abusive. And like one of the other things that I'm really scared about when I try to explain this to people is like most gaming companies own more personal information on you than most governments do. Like, if you actually realize some of the permissions that mobile gaming companies are really creating, it's kind of scary. They know your location, they know every time you use your app, they know all the apps you've downloaded, all the apps you deleted. They sometimes have access to your contacts, your photos, right? Depending on these permissions. And there's a lot of abusive people that you'll see on there. Of course, I'm not saying that's the case for every single person, but in most cases, it's very much the vast majority of users, especially those who are under 25 years old, who don't understand the permissions that they're granting over. And that's the other thing that we love about Web3. No one talks about it, but like Web3 has already built privacy as a service into the blockchain, right? The fact that you're secured, I have zero interest in selling your information to another entity. But this is literally the primary business model of 99% of free to play studios because what they need to do with their non spending users, which is usually 95% of their user base, they need to churn them into some type of revenue. And that's usually selling them off to another company, selling their data or information, right? Or trying to get them to convert into some type of offer wall action to earn incentives in the existing game. But in reality, like that's not the future I want to present for consumers. So honestly, I never thought I'd get back into gaming if you asked me about 3 years ago. Like to be very honest, I kind of just like started doing really random shit. Like I owned a coffee shop. I started like doing some stuff in sports. I started working on like an electric car idea. Like I was just doing really interesting passion project stuff. And then, like I had a lot of people who were already in crypto, and a lot of people knocked on my door, told me about it, and like I thought crypto was really cool as an idea, but it just never really gravitated towards me as much as it did when I saw NFTs. When I saw NFTs, I'm like, fuck. Programmable smart contracts to give ownership back to users in an immutable layer is literally brilliant. It is brilliant in every way you could think about it. And now we just need to find a great way to utilize it. And once that aha moment was there, I was hooked, right? I was hooked as a trader, I was hooked as a collector, and I was hooked as a builder. And for me, it's kind of like, in a in a maybe awkward poetic way of saying it, it's a way to correct the wrongs of what a lot of us did in Web 2. Right? Like that's probably the weirdest way of explaining it. I think we could reestablish better ownership. And this is so important. Like one of the big, like I'm probably going on a little bit of a philosophical rant, but this is more interesting for each of you as you are all here in Web3 this early. What is the most important thing that we could get for humanity? We need more humans to be owners. We want them to own more property. We want them to own their own business. We want them to own, whatever it may be in their lives, right? Ownership is the way to really be able to find like financial security for any individual wherever you are in the world. And Web3 is a really powerful way to ensure that ownership is allocated to more people rather than less. And in Web 2, that's what we got. We got aggregation of wealth and honestly ownership into the hands of the few. I think Web 3 takes it back, and it could start as simple as digital asset ownership. I know that's super subtle, but imagine what this can look like long term, where everything is assigned with ownership and everything you do, you get access to. And there's lots of other interesting stuff outside of consumer entertainment. Like, think about every user who's paying rent in the world and not getting any equity in the ownership of the property that they're in. Is there a way to return that structure where there is some type of enterprise value and ownership being captured even when you're a renter, right? Which is a very interesting model to think through. So I don't want to go too crazy because I also think through a lot of ideas outside of gaming as well. But it's just a very, very exciting reason why we all came back to Web3 is that this is the only medium worth building on. And once you realize that, like once you unfortunately get hooked, nothing else matters. It's not even close. Like when anyone tries to explain a Web 2 game to me, my friends, like I have a lot of close friends who work at a lot of the top studios, I couldn't care less. They're trying to tell me, hey man, look at this new algorithm for this match three puzzle maker we made. I'm like, cool, like let me get back to my own stuff. And I think that's when you know you found something special, right? Like
Yeah.
you found something where nothing else matters, and that's where you want to be. I just wish this space was less, volatile and more healthy. But of course, you can't have your cake and eat it too. So you got to build with the, with the market and ebb and flow accordingly.
Yep. And what you just touched on is like the most difficult thing in Web3 is just the volatility of the market and just like, you know, exactly that. Like, FTX happened, which had nothing to do with any NFT project, but that happened. And then all of a sudden it's directly, affecting the entire NFT market right now. And that's got to be proving to be one of the biggest roadblocks, to push the innovation out there. So like when I'm like looking at Lost Realms and looking at what you guys are trying to do, I'm curious about like the scalability. You said like the 3-year product roadmap, like in is that like kind of like, you know, like I want to hear more about like the future, like of what you guys are thinking. Like how hard are you going to scale? Are you just gonna, as Tribe, going to release like Lost Realms, then Fury, and then are you guys going to have another different type of like genre out there? Because I'm kind of curious about like where do you guys see in 5 years, like in 2027, where are you going to see Web3 gaming?
Yeah, I mean, I think in Web3 gaming, it's going to be really interesting on how people want to quote unquote slice up their vertical of ownership. And I don't think there's a wrong answer. I think it's just important that people have an answer on how they're going to do it. So, the answer on behalf of what Tribe and Lost Realms and Fury are trying to do is we're trying to own two categories and build two universes. We're trying to win everything like fantasy, RTS, RPG initially, right? And that's where Lost Realms really comes in. It sets kind of everything in this pixel like world, but our goal is to really make sure that it's not just pixels, it can go and grow into a entire iconic franchise relatively quickly. Like what is the real thing we're trying to do is imagine what Legend of Zelda was, right? And you remember playing the first Legend of Zelda with just some simple pixel characters. Imagine we're able to create something like that with Lost Realms, right? And again, this is a stretch because Legend of Zelda is such an amazing game. But
Yeah.
like imagine though that Legend of Zelda was created in Web3 in that pixel art game, and everyone was able to mint their own link, their own one of one link. And then as Legend of Zelda started to expand and start adding more games over different consoles, different mediums, your one of one pixel character start being a one of one 3D character on the Game Boy or any of the other like mediums you see. And then potentially becomes this full high res 3D character on the Switch. And it's still your one of one character that existed from that 30-year timeline of Legend of Zelda, but you had that ownership all the way through. That's kind of what we're trying to do with Lost Realms, is like this first character you own, we want to kind of speed run the 30 years it took Zelda to go from pixel to 3D. We want to do that technically in 3 years, right? And what I mean by that is I'm not saying that I'm trying to capture the height and success of Lost Realms in 3 years. What I want to do is I want to showcase the evolution of ownership of that asset in that 3 year window. And that's kind of you see on the screen is like the first two games are pixel art. If you see on Lost Realms, where you'll see kind of the RPG and the card battling game. But if you look closely to the RTS, we're looking at building a 3D art for Lost Realms, right? And the idea would be is that it's kind of leveraging up the art assets to be able to build that universe to be really full. But our goal over this next 3 year product roadmap is really only core focusing on these two franchises, right? Fury and Lost Realms. And Fury's goal is to win sports as a category. It starts with racing, but we have other sports genres in our mindset as well. And what's really cool about Fury, and I can just give you guys a quick sneak peek here at the end, is like as I mentioned, like Fury is actually the game we did a lot more development on. It's kind of surprising. This is actually a full 3D game, and these are like full live engine game shots of the game running on browser at the moment right now, leveraging real metadata. And the real cool thing about this game is that it's like Zed Run on steroids, if you're familiar with Zed
Yep,
Run.
the horse
But the cool
racing.
thing is it has its own, yeah, and it's got its own racing AI engine. So these cars don't stay in the same lanes like Zed Run. They actually like whip, wind, and go right through each other, which is really exciting. Leveraging the metadata for every calculation of a race. Plus, each car is one of one, each driver is one of one, and you're able to add different mods to it as well. And that's kind of where we get really excited. And like, even to be like crazy, what's cool is like we've been building this so long. Like, let me see if I could find this trailer for you guys. I think you'd get a kick out of it. Give me 1 second. Uh, YouTube. Oh yeah, this is it. Drop this in for you guys, and it just kind of shows you kind of how crazy we are. Um, oh, this link is not allowed. Can I send you a link somehow, or
Yeah, you can definitely.
I'll DM you? Here you go, Zero. So, if you guys want, you can check that out. It's actually our trailer for Fury, and like, what's really crazy, just to let you know, like Fury as well has been a game we've been working on for the last 12 months too. And what's kind of insane about Fury, is that if you look at that trailer was done in April 2022. So it just shows you how much we've had in our back pocket on kind of what we're building and what we're scaling towards. And the real reason why we show these trailer assets is what's really cool about this is that this is actually utilizing the same 3D models and textures in our game. They're just, of course, higher resolution and kind of this kind of video render style. But what this allows you to see is like what our cars can look like if we wanted to upscale them to high-end AAA mobile or high-end AAA console. We could actually do it relatively easily, right? While the cars that you're seeing here are just optimized for browser, right? To make sure that, of course, frame rate is being hit correctly so everyone can play it. So this is kind of where we have a lot of room to explore. And that's kind of where we get most excited about kind of everything we're building is that it's built for this long-term utility. But Fury is just something to share in our back pocket, and this is kind of why a lot of people get excited about kind of why we're building and what we're trying to do because we have multiple stuff. So the one thing we do have out in the market right now is our Genesis Pass, essentially, which is the Tribe Diamond Pass. So we have 200 diamonds right now out in the market. They kind of sit between 8 to 12 ETH floor, which is really great. Amazing collectors, like literally, like hundreds of apes, hundreds of punks, hundreds of clones, all amongst the initial holders, which has been really exciting. But it's essentially those who really believe in our long term vision because they want to get access to all of the pieces that we have. And the Tribe Diamond essentially serves as that airdrop layer as well. But hopefully that gives you a sense of kind of how we see these pieces. And the truth is, right, is in this market is like we have a general understanding of how we want to build for multiple years, right? But in the end, right, it's also really important as we talk about is we have to react according to what the market wants. If for some reason the market tomorrow just decides to say like we only love casual games, like great, I will probably have to go optimize a weird match 3 puzzle game to be able to like add into Lost Realms. I'm not saying that's likely, but I'm just saying like that's what good founders are really going to have to do in this
Yep,
marketplace as well.
adapt.
So for us, yeah, so for us, it's just setting up the universe that we could fill it in, and we could fill it in with different game genres, with different game content. Like for Lost Realms, like just between us, like we already are starting working on like the initial toys. We'll have a few toy models early in December in a couple weeks, and then we also have comics in production as well. And the idea is that these aren't going to be like the core utility of it, but it's just showcasing that we could really build with multiple mediums and showcase that value to users. And if I think if you do that right, these are what a lot of the best projects are going to get right over time.
Yeah, I mean, I was just about to ask something about the, Diamond Pass and like how it relates to like Lost Realms and like the whole ecosystem as a whole. Like, if you're a holder of a Diamond Pass, besides like I know there's some inside your Discord, you have some like benefits depending on which rarity of the diamond you got. But in the long term, like, how does that affect like, being like with Lost Realms and with Fury, just like being a holder, like what kind of benefits do you get as far as like the gaming side of it?
Yeah, we're actually going to do a really big announcement in the next week. But yeah, what I can share with you right now is the Tribe Diamond Pass will be the first layer and the primary layer of value to everything in our ecosystem. The diamonds will be the most valuable asset that we build and we collect for. So, what the diamonds do is they essentially generate free airdrops to every layer of economy value into every game we build. So not only are you getting like free mint, you're actually going to be able to get your own custom Grail collections. So like we're about to announce like a very unique small supply PFP collection that's primarily going to be anchored just to diamond holders, and they'll be getting that as free claims. There'll also be a few other like Genesis NFTs that are going to be coming out that represent each of these ecosystems, right? And that's what's really exciting here is that our goal is really to make sure that our greatest proponents and the greatest believers have the ability to capture the greatest upside and ROI in regard to the universe we're building. So every time we launch something, we ask ourselves, what's a plus one for this for diamonds too? And that will continue to be our philosophy moving forward. So what you'll see very quickly is like, a diamonds are already getting like some one-to-one benefits for the individual diamonds that will be unlocking soon, but they'll be getting their own supply, their own airdrop. There'll be also other bonuses like slugs of tokens will also be coming to them as well, so that they'll always be able to have that first layer of value and hopefully be aligned with all the products we build. But there's a lot more to come out there. And again, as we kind of essentially navigate this new market condition, you'll kind of see a new collection coming out with us that kind of bridges Diamonds and Lost Realms. That's kind of what's going to be really cool. We're kind of creating a small prequel to Lost Realms. And this is going to be something we'll announce bigger and full next week. And this is where diamonds are going to start seeing really fast value, because our goal is now to be able to go to like live operations mode where we'll be having very meaningful announcements on product, mini game loops, and essentially like new upside to diamonds on a like bi-weekly basis. So that's just about to get activated, and you'll kind of see that running in full force.
Wow, some serious alpha just dropped right there. I was definitely curious. I am a Diamond Pass holder, by the way, so I'm definitely happy to hear all of that good information about it. Um, so like one of the things that I was also like, some people out there in the audience were curious about is, like what, the graphics for I mean, not the graphics, but like for the requirements for your game. I mean, it's a pixel art, so it can't be like too, you know, graphics card intensive, So like I'm assuming that everybody can play this game, right?
Yep, every browser essentially can play it. Web browser initially. It also does technically work for Android browser at the moment. Apple browser has some interesting stuff to it that we're still kind of navigating out. We actually do use like 3D effects. This game is built in in Unity. So what's cool is like the battle effects are going to have some 3D elements for it. But again, it's all generally light. So you can say that this overall game experience is going to be both CPU and GPU light, which means that it could run effectively anywhere. And again, this is why it's our advantage, why we could port to mobile really quickly, we could port to VR relatively quickly. If we see those market opportunities, we could build that very relatively quickly because the assets and design is light. And because the game does still have a skill game loop, because it's not fully idle based, it can be idle based if you want, right? There'll be like an auto battle button for the actual like turn based PvP loop. but it's actually like a full skill game. Like the heroes that you bring in, the type of attacks that you do, the type of combinations you bring on your team, they all are going to matter in regard to the overall game loop. So that's where it's going to be really exciting for users, where the skill still can be surfaced out, but it's a skill that doesn't require you need to be like, amazing APM player that can do high actions per minute and be like the top esports player. We're not going towards that level. It's rather simple to learn and play, right, and difficult to master, right, is kind of the general framework that we've been holding with the game experience as well.
Very cool. Let's see. I just want to make sure that we're getting all these questions. Do you have any time restraints, like as far as like, needing to leave? If you do, I definitely want to adhere to those.
Yeah, I have about like 7 more minutes to
Okay,
10 more minutes. Like it would be
cool.
great there to wrap up then.
Absolutely. And one more thing is, like everybody in the NFT space are not all gamers. How are you going to, is there like a way where people who don't play video games can benefit from being a Lost Realms holder? Is there any kind of idle game mechanics that you guys might be able to implement?
Yeah, there's already idle in there, right? You could auto battle mechanics, and then there's also passive earning of tokens. It's a little bit, it's definitely less efficient than other ways. But effectively, you as a whale or you as a passive user can just send all your characters to the mines and do nothing for 6 months, and they will accrue tokens over time, right? But that token earning and that token yield is like 50% less than what an active gamer will be. So effectively, you as a user have to make the decision of like, what's the level of investment I want to make? And more importantly, what's the level of time investment I want to make as well? And then over time, we're also looking at like structures that, to be very honest, what Axie Infinity got right was the concept of scholarships, right? But what they got wrong is that they required so much management for that. Like if you actually had to run a scholarship team, it was a lot of work. Like you actually were like having a team manager, you had 50 or 100 people kind of running beneath you. It was really tough in the initial days prior to guilds, and then kind of guilds have come up, which also play another interesting role. But I think if you really want to get a system like that right, you have to build like essentially like a automated like market matcher, right? That essentially says like, hey, I have this asset available and it's really high value. Can you pair it with another player who showcases high value skills? Allow them to rent it from me, and we take a percentage of the revenue share in an automated manner. This is something I think you'll see kind of coming from us in kind of near the mid game, because essentially, right, what we need to do is we need to have economic inefficiency at the start, right? That's a really important factor when you are building any type of economy design. If your economy is overly efficient, right, it's effectively going to be a Ponzi in the end, right?
Yeah.
So what you need to do is you need to create real pain points. So if a whale feels a pain point, it's like, oh man, I'm only sending my character to the mine and I'm only earning 50% of my tokens. Man, if someone allows me to rent them and I earn like 70% of my tokens, I'll do it in a heartbeat because I'm getting more than what I was passively making. And then the active user is able to earn 30% of the earnings where they don't have to own the asset, but they can play the game. There's something really interesting there, but again, no one's gotten that effectively fully right. So we want to be conscious of how to make sure that is, but that is definitely something on our roadmap in the mid game to get there. But in the end, right, we built this product to actually be where if you are a whale or a passive gamer, if you just literally play the game 3 times a week for 15 minutes a week, right, regardless of however many assets you have, right, we allow you to bundle all your actions and stuff like that. But if you just commit less than an hour total across 3 or 4 sessions a week, you'll be able to earn about 80% of the full token yield potential of your characters. And then if you really want to earn maximum yield, you'll probably be spending between like 3 to 4 hours a week, which again, I don't think is crazy amount of time. But again, it's something that we want to make sure that this market can adapt to. And we essentially can then change the economic yield and return based off the player session data that we're seeing. This is again where something we want to react, but we're erring on the side of caution. We expect users to be more traders than gamers initially. And our goal is to build an actual UI flow. And that's kind of what we've done behind the scenes is that we built a UI and a game experience that makes it so easy for passive players to play. Right. And I think that's going to be a really key part of a design factor for us to keep traders excited and still be able to, whenever they have a little bit of downtime, right, for 15 to 30 minutes, we hope that Lost Realms will pop in their mind where, like, might as well get a little bit more yield.
Yeah, that was gonna lead me to another question is just with the whales and kind of catering to them is the benefits that you get from owning multiple NFTs? Is there anything beside out of the, realm of just being able to send multiple people to the mines and whatnot?
100%, man. There's combo bonuses, there's special
Oh
quests that
yeah.
require certain characters, right? You always want to give incentives to larger holders, right? And that's the other weird thing about Web3 gaming. It's something you never have to think about in Web2 gaming. Like when you're building Skyrim, you're like, hey, right, everyone's going to only have like one character, right, to play. Like, yeah, that sounds right. Like that's the story. Here in Web3 gaming, it's like, hey, my top holder owns a fucking 200 of these. What the fuck? Like, yeah, like welcome to this game experience. And you have to design for that. And you have
Yeah.
to design for UI and UX to account for that as well. And that's kind of where a lot of the challenges are for a lot of the Web3 gamers. Because again, when you look at any of the holder distribution layers on any major collection, you always have outsized whales, right? It's just how this market is dominating. So it's not that we're only incentivizing for them. It's just we're not forgetting about them,
Yeah.
right? And I think if you could at least, of course, make sure that's a healthy relationship, you could still provide them upside by whaling and having that overall upside with other actions in the world. There'll be other airdrops that you get for certain things. And if you own X amount of characters, there'll be different badges, different rewards, right? And if you collect them all, you'll be able to get some really cool stuff that'll come into the game experience as well. But essentially, our goal is always to make sure users are chasing some way to expand or level up, whether it be an individual holder of just one or a whale holder of 5 or 10 or more. We want to make sure that there's always another incentive for them to reach.
Yeah, so it's like, yeah, it's like you're definitely rewarding people who are, let's just early supporters of what you guys are building and stuff. But what would you say to some people who are out there that are not whales? And is it even possible for non-whales to be able to compete with the earning rates that the whales are able to do it at?
100%. The whales don't break earning rates, right? They don't have multiples that are like 2x, 5x multiples. They're like minor 10 to 20% bonus rates on yield rates. And the real belief is recognizing that our game experience actually allows everyone to expand. So, more of these details will come out, but what you'll actually see is that our entire economy is being built where that if you start with just one NFT and you're an active gamer, you'll most likely be able to mint one, if not two more characters, right? So you'll actually be able, if you are actively playing and driving value in that manner, you'll be able to capture asset upside and be able to have your own team semblance without needing to be a whale, right? What we're just really allowing for is the encouragement for whales, but the core game experience essentially is, hey, if you're actively playing and you could own between 2 to 4 assets, and it really only requires you to start with one and you'll unlock the others along the way. There's not a requirement for you to have immense buy pressure for you to keep up. You could still play in that world, you could still capture ownership, you still capture tokens, and those tokens will have really deep utility. And if anything, as a smaller holder, in reality, when you're playing with whales that you essentially have a token based economy around, that's actually a bullish sign for being a quote unquote smaller holder. But remember, the important thing to recognize is that we are only talking about whales hypothetically. The other important thing that we're done with Lost Realms is no one's getting quote unquote double mints. We've actually allowed listed pretty much the entire supply, and it's really one mint for everyone except Tribe Diamonds. And Tribe Diamonds are only getting two extra free mints each, and that's only 200 users. So what you're seeing is that if there's any type of buy pressure for whales to consolidate, it should hopefully be helpful to small holders because they have to buy from you, right? So you have hopefully liquidity leverage or pricing leverage to be able to decide, do you want to continue to play or do you want to take the upfront liquidity? So there will be value propositions all along the way. And that's kind of how we're thinking about the overall balance. But in the end, just owning one character is going to be so powerful in Lost Realms if you own a Genesis character from day one. That Genesis character should have something as valuable as kind of what we see the Artifact universe has done. If you're familiar with Artifact, right, what they actually started with was just one NFT called the Meta Pigeon. If you own that Meta Pigeon, it then allowed you to get 3 CloneX files. And those 3 CloneX files, of course, allowed you to redeem 3 CloneX. And if you redeem 3 CloneX, you were able to get three space space pods, right? And then
Mm-hmm.
another three space pod twos, and then another loot box one, and then another loot box two,
Monolith
and now you're
and
going to get an animus, exactly, right? And it's that kind of thing. So that's the same way we're building it, right? You have to realize one hero in Lost Realms is going to have potentially a similar like path, right? The key is whether or not we can hold that supply power and the value power and that utility power in the game. And the biggest confidence we can give to holders, and I think at least what people resonate with us, is that we're just not being greedy, right? When we're going to start layering more value, we're not layering more value by asking you for more ETH if we ever would ask for ETH in the first place, right? What we're just going to ask you to do is keep using your tokens, keep using the tokens and put utility on this. And by doing that, you start creating a significantly healthier economy, a totally different economic structure. And the big thing is making sure that you have new assets that have new utility and new value and new ownership at a really right pace. And that's effectively what we've already done with the Lost Realms universe because we have all these layers of value. It starts from heroes, but it goes much further than the Genesis heroes. You have Gen 2 heroes, you have land claims, you can have pet claims, you have token claims. Like all of these become, we believe, effective layers so that you become the barons of this universe. That's what these initial holders are going to be able to get to. And when you become barons of this universe, imagine what happens when we start onboarding the masses of a next 100,000 users. Great, these 100,000 users become the class below you in the minor league while you are the barons you could hopefully reap rewards from their engagement, their gameplay, etc. So that's where we really try to get people, and I think a lot of our holders get excited because they start recognizing like one NFT can be incredibly powerful in our ecosystem as long as you play with it and you hold it, right? There's a lot of stuff that will allow for it to create other liquidity options and potentially other airdrops in the future.
Wow, good stuff. I appreciate it so much. I know that you guys you don't have much time left, so I definitely want to respect that, and we can go ahead and wrap it up. I went through the AMA question channel and tried to touch on as many of the things, even ask some of the questions of my own. I swear you and I could probably hang out and talk for several hours. That's why I love crypto gaming so much, is that there's so much to talk about besides, like a PFP project. Like how many questions, how much conversation can you truly have on that? But this we could, talk for hours and hours, but we won't because we all have a lot of stuff going on. And I appreciate you so much because I know you have a very busy schedule. So, on behalf of everyone at Degenheim, myself, the team, and all the holders, we thank you so very much, Nick and Elusive Ape, for coming out here and really educating us about another amazing gaming project that's going to be coming out. And Degenheim and Lost Realms slash Tribe are going to be the future of what's going on in Web3, and I'm looking so forward to that. So I really do appreciate you. Just want to remind everyone out there, you have been given a role. If you were in here hanging out and spending time in the AMA, you were given a role. Go into the AMA questions text channel, and there is where you can enter to win. We have 10 spots for only available for AMA, so your best chance possible to get and a whitelist for Lost Realms is right here, right now. So thank you guys so much for allocating us some spots for that to reward people for coming out and educating themselves. And I always appreciate that. I'm really big on education, and I'm big on just like making sure people are like learning about projects instead of just blindly minting and blindly buying things off of OpenSea. And I really am trying to get rid of all of that stuff. So Nick, thank you so much. If you have any last words, feel free to do so and right now. If not, then thank you
No,
again. It's
I,
been an absolute
I
pleasure.
appreciate it, man. Yeah, it was a pleasure as well, guys. Thanks so much. If there's any other questions, you could always hit me up here. I'm also on Twitter at SaintWeb3, so you could hit me up there as well. Really appreciate the feedback, the insights. Thank you guys so much for having us here as the Deejay High community. I'll let you guys go. Enjoy the rest of your day, and we'll chat soon, man.
Absolutely. We'll have to have you back for the Fury AMA and presentation for sure.
Absolutely, man. Thanks, guys, so much. Have a great one.
Alrighty. Take care.